Welcome to The Explainer. Whenever we picture a medieval noble household, our minds instantly jump to those polished, glittering worlds we see on the big screen, right? We imagine sweeping, candlelit halls, lords draped in silk, bottomless goblets of rich wine, the whole shebang. But today, we're going to entirely strip away that Hollywood glamour. We're looking at the small army of exhausted, overworked human beings who actually kept that illusion running. Because the truth? The people making that wine appear, keeping those massive fires burning, making those stone floors sparkle, they were not living a fairy tale. They were living a nightmare. Just a nightmare with better lighting.
Okay, let's dive right into this. There's just such a stark contrast here between the fantasy and the freezing, grueling reality. Let's get one thing straight right out of the gate. Absolutely nobody grew up dreaming of becoming a servant in a drafty castle. There was no medieval career fair booth screaming, "Hey, ask me about scrubbing chamber pots for a living." I want you to really put yourself in their shoes for a second. Imagine you're a younger child in a peasant family. There are simply too many mouths to feed, and frankly, not enough turnips to go around. So you're sent away to the castle. Not because your family wanted to get rid of you, but because sending you away meant the rest of your family might actually survive the winter. Instantly, you become the property of a household that didn't ask your opinion, and trust me, they never ever will. And when it comes to compensation, there is a massive, glaring omission. Actual money. As a new servant, there was no interview, no resume, absolutely no negotiating your salary. You basically just showed up, someone looked you over like livestock, and boom, you were on the staff. You weren't paid in coin. You were paid in pure survival. 90% of your salary was just a leaky roof over your head and a daily bowl of pottage. That tiny little 10% sliver left over? That represents the occasional scrap of cloth you'd get when your current outfit disintegrated completely past the point of basic decency. There was no employment contract, just the unshakable, terrifying awareness that you were entirely replaceable by literally anyone desperate enough to walk through those castle gates. That pure survival mode, it dictates your entire daily routine. Your day absolutely does not start when the sun rises. Oh no, it kicks off at 4 a.m. in the suffocating, pitch-black dark. Why? Because the nobles like their fires roaring and their bread fresh out of the oven before they even opened a single aristocratic eyelid. You didn't have a bedroom. You slept wherever there was space. Maybe you curled up on the kitchen floor near the dying embers, like a tired dog. Privacy wasn't even a concept that had been invented yet. And if you didn't wake up on time, well, there's no snooze button at 4:15 a.m. There was a bucket of freezing cold water and someone screaming your name. You fumbled into your one outfit in the dark, and by 4:30 a.m., you were lighting the breakfast fires. Your ability to serve was now basically your entire personality. And this brilliantly illustrates the brutal social structure you were trapped in. People loved to romanticize castle life, but the household hierarchy was vicious. At the top, you've got the steward, basically the general manager who answered directly to the lord and could literally ruin your life with a raised eyebrow. Below them, the chamberlain, managing the lord's personal needs and acting as a poorly paid emotional sponge for all his mood swings. Then there's the cook, terrifying in literally every household. They ruled the kitchen with absolute authority and a very real willingness to hurl a heavy metal ladle right at your head. And then, at the absolute miserable bottom, is you, the newest, lowest, most expendable person in the entire building, tasked with absolutely everything involving filth, fire, or usually both. To make matters even worse, kindness absolutely did not flow downward in this ecosystem. It's basically trickle-down economics, but for rage. Step 1. The Lord is unhappy about something completely out of your control, so he yells at the steward. Step 2. The steward, who is now furious, marches down and yells at the cook. Step 3. The cook turns around and screams at you. You were the ultimate scapegoat. You would routinely learn several fascinating, brand new ways to be blamed for things, like spoiled milk, that you had never even touched. I want this number to really sink in for a second. 40. Being a servant in a medieval castle was not a single job description, not even close. It was 40 distinct, back-breaking jobs, all being performed by a single, completely exhausted human body. So what did those 40 jobs actually look like? Well, here's just a little taste of your relentless physical labor. You were hauling well water, dozens of trips a single day, because nobody important was going to carry their own water, right? You were chopping firewood to ensure the Lord never felt even a momentary draft. You were scrubbing floors on your hands and knees with lye soap that ate through your skin way faster than it ate through the grime. You were emptying chamber pots, which, yeah, an incredibly unsanitary daily nightmare. And if you happened to be a laundress, you were boiling linens in water hot enough to literally take the skin off your hands, leaving them perpetually raw and just reeking of lie.
And while you are breaking your back doing all of this, you have to feel the never-ending, totally absurd stream of noble demands. Consider this actual historical complaint. Why does the soup taste like soup? I mean, come on. This is the level of entitlement we were talking about here. The fire's too low. Actually, wait, now the fire's too high. Bring a different cloak. Pour more wine. The demands were relentless. And if you're wondering about labor rights, forget about a lunch hour. A lunch break for a castle servant was basically just a slightly shorter period of being screamed at while you hurriedly shoveled food into your mouth standing up.
Let's contrast how the two halves of the castle actually lived. Up at the Lord's table, they could demand a 10-course meal just because they felt like making your life difficult that day. Meanwhile, your reality down on the servants' floor, you definitely didn't eat what the Lord ate. You ate the discarded leftovers, bread that didn't quite meet noble standards, pottage that had been simmering in the exact same unwashed pot for a week straight. On feast days, hey, you might actually get a genuine treat like a scrap of meat. That is, assuming the Lord's hunting dogs hadn't gotten to it first. And yes, you would absolutely find yourself on the floor, physically losing an argument with a dog over a piece of gristle.
This brings us to a really harsh, uncomfortable truth. To the nobility, you weren't a person. You were just furniture that occasionally fetched things. You had a total lack of rights. There was no HR department to file a grievance with because the Lord was the law, the judge, and occasionally the executioner. If you dropped a tray, you were publicly humiliated. If you stole something small, even if you were starving and desperate enough to completely justify it, it wasn't treated as survival, it was treated as a personal betrayal of the Lord. And the punishments? They were swift, physical, and brutal.
So the absolutely crucial point here is this grim, long-term reality. It was a generational trap. You could work in that exact same drafty household for decades. You could raise children who went to work in that exact same kitchen. You could grow old serving that one family, and at the end of your entire life, you would own absolutely nothing. No land, no savings, no security. Just a legacy of exhaustion, passing down an invisible background existence to the next generation, so somebody else's glamorous life could continue entirely uninterrupted.
But, despite everything, they still carved out their own humanity. There were feast days where they finally got to enjoy the food they spent hours cooking. There were quiet little moments swapping gossip by the fire after the Lord finally went to bed. Shared exhaustion creates these incredibly deep, tight-knit friendships, sometimes the only real family these servants had. They hummed simple songs while scrubbing pots just to pass the brutal hours. And of course, they had their tiny, satisfying acts of rebellion, like maybe snagging an extra piece of bread or, oops, accidentally letting the Lord's least favorite, muddiest dog into his pristine bedchamber. Which leaves us with a final question. The castle looked completely magnificent from the outside, but it ran every single hour of every single day on the backs of people that history barely even bothered to remember. So, as you drift off to sleep tonight in a warm bed with the lights out, give a little thought to who really kept the castle alive. Was it the Lord who owned it? Or was it the exhausted, resilient servants who kept the fires burning and the floors clean so he never once had to lift a finger?